Hello and welcome to C Programming Bootcamp Part 2. My name is Donna Martin. This course is going to go over basic I/O and the more complex data types such as arrays, structures, pointers, and we're going to be talking about solid programming techniques. This becomes particularly important in C, especially when we start moving into the area of pointers, which is where you know exactly where something is stored and can access it by knowing that memory address. And that can get you into a little bit of trouble if you're not really aware of what's going on. So we're going to talk in great detail about the stack and what's really going on when we call functions and what's happening when you deal with pointers. As a result of taking this class, you're going to be able to use single and multidimensional arrays. You'll be programming with structures, and even complex structures will have structures within structures and structures that have arrays as members. You can do some pretty complex and sophisticated programming once you understand structures. We're going to implement pointers, which is a big thing in C, and we're going to make sure that you have a thorough understanding of what they are, how they're used, and what their advantages are, and really what's going on. Pointers is one of the big places in C where people don't really understand them. They get in trouble right away. But they're very powerful, and there's a lot of really exciting things you can do with them. So we're going to give you a really good understanding of pointers. We're going to be dealing with character strings and how to manipulate them. And we're going to teach you, as usual, to program with C effectively, efficiently, and just really understanding what's going on. We assume that you already not only have experience with the programming language, but you need to have some experience with C or have taken the Programming Bootcamp Part 1 course, because we're kind of starting here in the middle of the language and assume there's some topics that you already know about. We assume that you're totally comfortable with your computer system and using it. We don't teach you how to do anything with your computer. We just teach you C programming. So here are our topics. We'll start with an introduction to input and output. We've done input and output in Bootcamp Part 1, but we want to talk about it in more detail and some of the options and what's happening and just give you more solid skills in that area as a programmer. So we'll do basic output and basic input, and then things to watch out for when you're dealing with input and output, because you can get yourself into trouble anytime you're dealing with the user or things can go wrong. So we want to talk about that. And then we'll start our trek into the world of pointers. We'll be using pointers, and then we'll move on into arrays. We'll do an advanced section on arrays that basically deals with arrays and how you use pointers with it. Then we'll move into this concept called structures, which is a way where we can store data of different types together. And we'll talk about pointers to structures. We'll be going over pointers in quite a bit of detail, so you'll really have a feel for those. Then we'll get into a little bit more complex data structure, like we've seen structures and we will have seen arrays, so then we'll talk about an array of structures. And then we'll move into advanced structures, where the members of a structure is not just a simple number or a simple character, but can be pretty complex. We can have structures that have structures that have structures, or we can have a structure that has an array of structures or an array of other things. So there's lots of things you can do with structures. Then we're going to move on into character strings. We're going to talk about the difference between character strings and character arrays, and some of the advantages to using character strings and how you initialize them and all those things. And then we'll talk about multidimensional arrays in C, not just the single one-dimensional array. Now, we will have been using variables up to this point, but we're going to talk about some of the more fancy variable types, and we'll talk about scope and local and global scope and all of that type of thing, and some of the more sophisticated variable types in this section. And then we have a second section that continues on in that, and then there'll be workshops throughout. Almost every section in here has a workshop, or we'll have a module that's split, and then you'll have a workshop after that. So there's lots of hands-on exercises that you'll get experience with these things throughout the course. So we are assuming that you have some sort of computer, some way to access the course and the videos. Windows, Mac, it doesn't matter, Linux, whatever you have. It may have you need access to a C compiler. Your system may already have that on it, in which case you're welcome to use that. We're not going to go over how to install a C compiler, so if you don't have one already on your system, you can do what we do in the course, which is we utilize online C compilers. There's quite a few out there. We used several in the first part 1, Bootcamp part 1, but you're welcome to use any of those, or if you have a personal favorite, there are several sites and blogs that talk about online C compilers that you can go out and see if you can find one that you like. IDE1, Coloru, OneBox, Rex Tester, CodePad, these are just some of the ones that are out there that we know to be reliable. You're welcome to use any of the ones that you would like. All right, so if you're interested in taking some of the other courses, then you might be looking at, if you did not have a programming background, you probably have already taken the Programming for Non-Programmers courses, which kind of gets you familiar with the concept of programming if you haven't had any exposure to it before. And then if you're not feeling, you don't have that solid background in computers and operating systems, you might want to take the Fundamentals of Operating System classes. We assume that you have this background before coming in here, and then that would lead you into the C Programming Bootcamp Part 1 and 2. And then after you complete this, if you're interested in moving on to Objective-C and iOS programming, that could be your next step. Alternatively, if you're interested in Android programming, you might take the Java programming course and move on into Android programming. All right, so things that you are probably wanting to get from the website. To best follow along, you go to the Materials tab on the course page, and there's a student guide there available for you. There's also an exercise guide, and we refer to that several times throughout the course to go there and get the workshop assignment. There also are sample solutions in the exercise guide, and we also will be reviewing all the sample solutions throughout the module. So I'll assign a workshop and make sure you understand what you're going to be doing, and then we'll go over a sample solution for that workshop. There's also a lab setup guide, but again, basically the lab setup guide simply tells you that if you don't already have access to a C compiler on your system, to go ahead and utilize one of the online C compilers like we do in the courses. All right, so let's get started.